Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being on our program today. I have two wonderful, wonderful individuals. I'm very blessed to know both of them now. First of all, Thelma Reyna. She is from Good Golden. Let me start all over again, please. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being on our program. I have the honor today of bringing in two individuals. Both of them I call my friends, not only because of their work, not only because of their impression of how to help the community, but also because of the literary contributions both of them have done. First one is Thelma Reyna. She is the CEO of Golden Foothills Press. There are many outstanding books. And one of them is this one. We're going to highlight not only the book, but the author today, Professor Alejandro Morales. And Thelma Reyna will give us the background on that, but I'm just very honored to have both of them on the show. And let's welcome Thelma.
Thank you very much, Alejandro. And believe me, it's my distinct honor, great pleasure to be here as well.
Okay, stop. My name is Armando.
Hi, what did I say? Alejandro?
Yeah.
That's okay, I call him Armando too.
Thank you, Thelma.
When you have 2 3-syllable Latino names, and they both start with
Tell
an
me
A.
about it. All right. All right. So I'm going to count down to 5. Or you're going to start, Thelma?
Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Thank you very much, Armando, for that introduction. It's absolutely my pleasure and delight to be here today with you and with a very distinguished author, Professor Alejandro Morales. Let me tell you a little bit about Alejandro, because he's here and we're going to have a very good discussion with him about his wonderful book, Zapote Tree, and a little bit of the backstory behind that. Alejandro is the son of Mexican immigrants. He was born in Montebello, California. He lived his childhood years in a company town of the Simon's Brick Yard, where his parents and many relatives worked, bordering Montebello. Alejandro has a BA degree from California State University, Los Angeles, and an MA and a PhD from Rutgers University. He is also an emeritus professor from the great school, UC Irvine in California. He was in the Department of Chicano and Latino Studies there. He has written extensively. You might be able to see behind my shoulder here a large poster. Each of those colored squares is one of Alejandro's books, published books. There are approximately 20 of them up there. Bilingual, English, Spanish, novels, short stories, nonfiction. And the 21st book is what we're here to discuss, Zapote Tree, which is historically the very first poetry collection by Alejandro. And I am so delighted that our press, Golden Foothills Press, was the one that helped Alejandro bring that into the light of day. Alejandro lives in Santa Ana, California. He's now working on 3 major book projects, and he is considered a pioneer in American Latino literature. Why? He was one of the very first Latino authors back in the 70s, 1970s, to depict, to document, to describe in his beautiful literature the harsh socioeconomic conditions of barrios and the Latino people here in the United States. His large body of work is very, very integral to not only Latino literature in America, but to the American literature scene as well. So let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit to Alejandro. Hi, Alejandro.
Hello.
You ready to go? You ready to roll?
Yeah, I'm ready to roll. Say hi to
Great.
saying hi to Europe, and it's international, so hello to everybody out there.
Wonderful. Yes, absolutely. Well, Alejandro, I think one of the, because you were so long in the prose aspect of literary creation, with your novels and short stories, and now you stepped out onto the poetry stage. I think a lot of people might be curious, what motivated that? Why did you switch from one gigantic genre, which has defined your career, into this new arena of poetry? What inspired you?
Well, poetry is something that I was doing all along. In other words, as I wrote novels and short stories, I also wrote poetry. You know, in fact, I started writing poetry probably when I was in junior high school. I call it poetry, but I didn't really know what poetry was necessarily. And so that's what got me going. And as far as poetry goes, and I use poetry also in my novels. My novels have a lot of poems that I put in that sort of describe the characters, or the one way to reveal characters is through what they write. So I have a lot more poetry that you might think I have, but I think I gave you a manuscript, the very first manuscript I gave you to look at. You looked through it and you said, "Oh my God, you have about 3 or 4 books of poetry here." So I didn't forget that. And that's what says, I turned around and said, "Look, you have a press and it's a really good press. Take a look at this and see what we can do with it." And that's what happened. And that's how I ended up publishing my first book of poetry. Although I have a second one almost ready to go, because like I said, I had a lot more, I have a lot more poems. And this has inspired me to continue to write poetry. It really has opened another door for me, another way to record my history, record my family history, community history, and so forth. You know? So yeah, I'm turned on to poetry now. But that doesn't mean I won't write novels. In fact, I'm in the middle of a novel right now.
Well, this is a great segue into my second question to Alejandro, and that is, do you have any difficulty in going from writing in the prose genre versus writing poetry? I know a number of poets who talk regularly about mental blocks that they hit oftentimes when they're writing on a book of poetry. So how do you operate? Do you have that same situation, going from something comfortable to something brand new?
No, I can't say that I do. You mentioned, what is it, the writer's block or this? I don't believe in writer's block. I mean, if I come into a place that I have a problem of getting from one scene to another scene, I continue to write. And I might I end up writing a page and a half, or sometimes maybe a paragraph or two. But nonetheless, that gets me to where I want to go. And even though I do a lot of research for my work, I still, would continue to write. But all that I've written and is not really intentionally a part of that novel, I save. So I save everything that I write. I save, those 2 pages that I mentioned to you that didn't have anything to do with the novel, or the paragraphs, and I use them because they might come in handy at another time. And that's why I don't believe in writer's block. I just write through writer's block for that matter.
Congratulations. That's a wonderful thing to be able to do. Well, here's kind of like a related question. Do you see any crossover attributes of what you create in prose and what you create as a poet? Very different genres, but do you see any commonalities that make your writing of poetry even more meaningful, more special, more comfortable, let us say? Any commonalities, any crossovers?
Actually, writing poems to me is very different than writing novels. Poetry to me is less words that say much more in a few words. Novels, I can develop a lot of different aspects of a character, different aspects of a place, and give detailed description of that place, that individual, what that individual is feeling, with 100 or 200 words, right? While in a poem, it has to be a lot less. But what the crossover for me is that both genres tell stories, right? And that to me is key. To me, the story is what's most important. If you have a great story, you will communicate with people no matter what language it's translated into. If you have a great story in a poem, it's the same thing. People will communicate, connect to it in some way. So I think that's to me, the important thing is telling a story. And one time I was giving a reading in a local bookstore here. And this woman who knows a lot about poetry tells me, Alejandro, every single one of your poems that you read is a story. In fact, you could probably turn it into a novel, which I could probably do. But that's, you know, the crossovers, there's not to say crossovers. It's basically, I think poetry is one genre and novels are one genre. To me, poetry requires less words, right? It's driven by nouns and great verbs, while in creating a novel or a short story, it's a lot more, how would I say, well, it requires a lot more research for me because I write about, you know, I write historical novels, biographical novels, and so forth. All my stories, you know, stories are stories about events that have occurred, people that I've known, etc.
Mhm. Wonderful. And yes, I've also noticed that about you, about your poetry, that much of it is like a little capsule short story, a little capsule novel. You know, you've got a character, you've got a plot, you've got a setting, you have a theme or a message that comes through. So tell us a little bit more about some of these recurrent or popular themes or messages that you try to bring across in all of your writing, because it sounds like they're very, very bonded in purpose. Tell us about that. And then when we get to hearing you read your wonderful poetry, I'm hoping that we'll get to see some examples of what you have just shared with us.
Yeah, well, you know, I write about my family. That's number one, right? And my neighborhood and the people in my neighborhood, because I lived for a while. I lived in a segregated town, right? That was a Simon's Brickyard town. It's a company town. But let me read a poem about right now about my mom, all right? And then I'll read one that deals a little bit with my father, okay? And I must say that my family and all of those people that live there, my brothers and sisters, those are my heroes. When I was kid growing up, those were my heroes, right? So this poem is called "Zapote Tree, Sweetest Memory," and it's about my mom. It's about me as a little tiny guy. So here's what it says: When I was very young, in the late afternoon, the house became quiet. After finishing her morning chores, mother lay down to rest. I climbed in next to her, eager for her to spoon me and cuddle me close in her warmth. Estate quieto, mijo. Oye, escucha los pajaritos. I followed her finger, pointing beyond the window to the great Zapote tree with thousands of singing birds. I listened to the chirping in the tree, her embrace, warm, safe. I was happy. I concentrated in the birds, singing in her breathing heart, in her immense calmness. I always fell asleep. The sweetest memory I have of her plays on. So that's a little about my mother. Okay, now I'm going to give you something about my dad. And my father, you know, to me, throughout my life, if I didn't want to get my mom upset, I never wanted to get her really see her cry or anything like that. Although I had some rough times in my life, that did happen. But my dad he was different. My father was, you know, I respected him a lot, and he taught me a lot. You know, and one of the things he did, in our little place we lived, there were many little stores, right? And some people, you know, some stores were grocery stores. And here's a moment in which we're going to a small little tiny grocery store, and I see a man who always sat there reading a book, and his real name was Vicente Olage, but excuse me, Vicente Lemos. But I always called him El Compadrito, right? And so this, where is that? Oops, I'm sorry. Oh, here it is, El Compadrito. So yeah, El Compadrito, and it goes like this. It says, I let go of my father's hands and walked over to see the old man reading on a bench in front of Don Costa's grocery store. El Compadrito, who always provided wise counsel. I listened, and even today, I hear el compadrito. No temes de la noche, porque la luz de un nuevo sol te brillará en la frente, y con la navaja rota forjarás la espada del valiente. Have no fear of the night, because the light of a new sun will shine on your forehead, and with a broken blade, you will forge the sword of the brave. And that poem has stuck with me throughout my life. Just like the Zapote Tree. The Zapote Tree was when I was a kid, every time I ran out the backyard, turn to the left, there was a gigantic Zapote Tree there. And this man was always, at that store. And so until he passed away, but I always remember the little stanza that he read to me. So yeah, so this is, these are examples of family, and each one tells a little bit of a story. Each one of those two little poems.
Beautiful. I have one last question. We noticed that the poem you just read, El Compadrito, is approximately half in English and half in Spanish. And I know that you have your unique way of dealing with language in all of your writing, whether it's prose, whether it's poetry, long ago, or with this brand new book. Tell us a little bit, just a little bit, about your perception of the use of language in good literature and how you handle that.
Yeah, well, I do. I've written, my first books were in Spanish, and they were published in Mexico with Joaquin Ortiz, which is a major house in Latin America. And they were eventually translated. And then I wrote a book that reflected what I believe was Orange County. And that book was completely bilingual, meaning that the main narration is in Spanish, and the characters who spoke Spanish. Those characters spoke English, right? And so Spanish is important. I'm not going to lose it. I use it in my work, and I think some of these poems also reflect the use of Spanish. And to me, languages are ways of viewing the world. So in English, I view the world in one way. In Spanish, it's a little bit different way to see the world. So that's why I like to use it. And I'm trying to find another poem here that ties that in. But I think I like to read another story that has another poem that has Spanish in it. I think this one does a little bit. No, I don't think it does. But anyway, but that's my feeling about using language, is that it is a way of looking at the world, and the more languages you can handle, your view of the world is different. And to me, through Spanish, my Spanish has changed a lot, because I went to a school that was segregated, and they wouldn't allow us to speak Spanish. So slowly, once I entered the American school system, I started to lose the words of Spanish, right? And I replaced them with English. But when I got older, I said, I'm not going to let that happen. And when I started going to school, I started studying Spanish. So I recaptured a lot of it to the point where I can, teach courses in Spanish. I can teach a graduate course in Spanish, etc. But yeah, that's my whole idea about Spanish. Don't lose it. If you're bilingual, keep practicing it.
I agree.
I'd like to ask a question about the book itself, the Zapote Tree. Why that title, and inviting the readers to go in and delve with some beautiful stories? Why the Zapote Tree?
Well, the Zapote Tree is I guess, kind of symbolizes me in a sense, right? Because it has roots, it has branches, it has branches, roots, and a trunk, and so forth. So it's just a metaphor for, in general, people that grow up. You're born, you have roots, you develop a trunk, you branch out in your life, and you begin to produce and so forth. And so and the Zapote Tree was always there. And I found it fascinating because it was so big, right? And it had a lot of fruit, and the fruit in the Zapote Tree is a green skin around it and a white fruit inside, right? And so it was there. It accompanied me through just about all my life until I left, until I got married. The Zapote Tree was still there. So it's something that it also identified, identified where I lived. I lived in the barrio, I lived in Simons, I lived in a segregated town, right? And that was me. I was at Zapote Tree, I was Simons, I was Mexican, right? And I spoke Spanish, and that was fine with me. I knew exactly who I was. I didn't have any conflicts of identity. And if you go beyond that company town, you walk into a place where that parts of Montebello, or the nearest town we lived at, were not too nice to Mexicanos. Barbershops were segregated. My father could only go to a particular, let's say, place to buy clothes, to buy furniture. There was a lot of segregation and racism out there, and that's a lot of my stuff deals with that too.
So can the reader believe that or expect that this Zapote Tree is kind of like a mini autobiography of you, Alejandro? Because I mean, you're right out of the gate, you're telling us this is me. Mm-hmm. Me is the title. Me is a photo here. I am a Zapote Tree. So all the elements of a tree that you just mentioned, the tree, the trunk, the roots, the leaves, the branches of fruit, are elements of your life. So is that a fair
yeah, I think you'll find a lot of me in my stories and in my novels, right? In my very first novel, is somewhat autobiographical, and that novel, you mentioned it, it shows a real dark side of the barrios and communities, Latino communities, especially Mexican communities and so forth, or probably even Puerto Rican communities or other communities, no? But it was a real tough time. I saw things that little kids probably would never see, but what I saw in that community. It wasn't a perfect life. It wasn't a perfect world. It was hard. So I write about those things. That's why the book didn't find very quickly my first novel, Caras Viejas de Vino Nuevo, was translated to Barrio on the Edge. It didn't find a publisher right away. It was rejected. First, it was written in Spanish. It was rejected by every American publishing house. The stories were really, really strong, very graphic, very violent novel. Although the critics liked it and they wrote a lot about it. So I've been fortunate as far as that goes.
It seems to me that you have entered a new chapter in your life regarding how you feel, what you wish to express. Mm-hmm. I believe that Zapote Tree, your book, is a very gentle, loving, compassionate, beautiful, musical book that, as you said earlier, focuses a lot on your family, on your background, on your history, on the community. So congratulations for having achieved this new dimension in your writing. And I'm wondering if you've got a couple of other poems. Armando, how are we doing with time? About how many more poems can Alejandro read?
We're running short on time.
Well, okay. I'll read one more. This one was nominated for the Pushcart Prize. So let me read a poem called Frida. And just the title, you probably know the Frida that I'm talking about, or I should talk about, but I'm not talking about that Frida. I'm talking about another Frida. And this poem goes like this. Frida. You can worship Frida, put her on a pedestal, dress like her, tattoo her on your body. I idolize nobody. I acknowledge the Mexican and Central American working woman sitting on the bus bench at 5 a.m. She cleans her house, she cleans your house, she mends your expensive department store clothes, she takes care of your child or your parents. I praise the Mexican and Central American woman. She waits at 6:30 in the afternoon for bus number 67. I smile at her tired face. She nods to sleep during the long ride to a corner in Santana where she gets off to walk to her sister's apartment. I offer admiration for that woman. She survives low pay, dirty words, pawing at her body, lustful looks, racist opinions, ugly gestures, empty nights, heartfelt loneliness. She is not afraid of you. Ella es una entre miles de mujeres ninguneadas by cruel, abusive women who, smiling, command with impunity to keep her docile maid in place. She is the unseen, unrecognized, crucial link to your economic backbone that you lean against in the seat of your luxury vehicle. Not afraid of you, no se raja. From her tumultuous and burning dreams, she rises again, never entirely rested, looks you in the eye, carves your mind, and reminds you of your terror of her leaving.
Two of my
Wow.
absolute favorite poems in that book. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. I think this is a wonderful way to close and for our readers to have a good taste of your writing in this book, Alejandro. Thank you so much for that.
And thank you, and thanks for everybody out there. Pleasure.
Thelma, I have a question. Where can our viewers worldwide find this outstanding book by Alejandro Morales?
Wonderful. Well, right off the bat, there are two easy places. The first is our press, www.goldenfoothillspress.com. Easy to remember, just the name of the press and .com. The other one is Amazon.com, which is very accessible. The third one is your favorite bookstore, actually. If you go to your independent favorite store, whatever, ask for it. And if they don't have it, they will order it for you, or you can order it from us. And I think also you can contact the author because he also has his own inventory of his books, and you could buy it directly from him. And the benefit in that would be that he could probably autograph it for you before he puts it in the mail.
You can send me an email at amorales, all one word, AMORALES @UCI.edu.
I'm doing it now. I have this book. I'm going to send it back to him. Ask him to please autograph it because I have just enjoyed it. I'm on my third reading of the same book. That's how fantastic this is.
Good.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Armando, for inviting us. And thank you to all the people who have tuned in and help us spread the word. Zapote Tree by Alejandro Morales, Golden Foothills Press, and Armando Sanchez and this wonderful show. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Armando.
Well, you're welcome. And you know what? I'll close it with one last word. I'm now motivated to write poetry. Thank you, Alejandro. And thank you, Thelma.
Glad to hear that. More power to you. Okay.
Adios.
Bye, everyone. Adios.
Bye-bye.